Okay, this happened today and it really messed with me. I've been thinking about it all day and all evening. I took my 5-year-old son and 3-month-old daughter to the playground today to meet a friend and her daughter. It's got regular playground equipment, a huge parking lot and a big grassy area and trees surrounding the play area. On the other side of the trees is some sort of development thing they are working on. The area this school is in is pretty rural. It's just a bunch of twisty roads and random buildings. I've never thought about or noticed this until today. We get to the park and meet up with my friend, another mom that we know is there with her 2 girls too. The only other people there are a dad with a little girl and a boy that looked to be somewhere between 10 and 12. So the moms are all sitting chatting, playing with my adorable daughter, having a good time. The kids are playing together and everything is good. Eventually all the kids from our group kind of wander off through the playground doing their own thing. The seesaws are in a shady area. Next to them is a big stretch of grass, then the trees with the semi-developed area behind that. My son wants to see the seesaw, but nobody wants to do it with it. I get up to go help him and the 10-year-old boy comes over and says hi, do you want me to play with him? Which was a little strange that he asked me and not my son. But I said, sure bud, go ahead. So he gets on the other side and starts seesawing with him. His demeanor was just so strange. He didn't smile and his voice was completely flat. He didn't say a word to my son, he just seesawed with it. My son was oblivious and chatting away at him. After a few minutes I started walking back to my bench and I heard the boy start talking with my son. Okay, so maybe he's shy around grown-ups. I sit down and start talking to my friends and the dad walks near as to probably go up to his car and I say, hey, it was really sweet for your son to offer to play with mine and smile at him. He looks at me and goes, he's not my son. I don't know who he is. He walked over and asked if I wanted him to play with my daughters and then just kind of followed us around until you guys got here. He sort of laughed like weird, right? And shook his head. I got a pretty uneasy feeling in my stomach and looked over to the seesaws. They are gone now. I jump up, hand my daughter to my friend and run in that direction yelling my son's name. I see them walking almost to the trees. The trees are not close at all by the way. I'd guess a football field or so away from the play area. I got this horrible feeling and ran as fast as I could yelling his name. He turned around and started trying to walk to me and the little boy grabs his arm and tries to pull him toward the trees. He gets upset and starts saying, hey, let go of me now. Usually this is not a quality about my son that brings me anything but trouble, but he does not like to be grabbed, pushed or pulled. And he has ADHD, so when he gets frustrated it usually comes out in aggressive ways. I was so thankful for this today. He starts punching the boy and headbutting him like a crazy person. The boy lets go as I get to them and runs to the trees. My friends are finally realizing something is going on, so they're standing on the edge of the play area looking confused. My son is crying and I'm shaking. I don't know what just happened. I asked my son where he was going and he said his friend wanted to take him to see Ryan from Ryan Toys Reviews. It's his favorite YouTube channel and he talks about it non-stop. He told the boy about Ryan and apparently the boy told him that he knew where Ryan lived and did my son want to visit him and play. So of course my son said yes. I don't know what the intention was. It was a kid. I don't understand why he would lie to my son, why he wanted to go in the woods or why he was that weird. Maybe it was innocent, but I don't think it was. 12 years of worked at Greenlawn and I can count on one hand the number of times anything genuinely strange has happened out here. Coyotes getting in through the south fence. Once I saw a homeless guy sleeping behind the maintenance shed twice one winter. Kids on Halloween every year, without fail, think they're the first ones effort to think of sneaking into a cemetery at night, but that's about the extent of it. After enough years, this job stops being creepy and starts being just a job. Same as any other, except quieter and with better job security, if you'll pardon the expression. I work the overnight shift in at 10, out at 6, walk the grounds every 2 hours, check the gates, check the maintenance building and write up the log. Most nights I finish my thermos of coffee before midnight, spend the rest of the shift listening to talk radio on the gatehouse. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand that when I say nothing ever happens out here, I mean it literally, 12 years and nothing until October. It was my second walk of the night, somewhere around 1:15. It was cold enough that I could see my breath with a clear sky and good visibility. I do the south loop first, which takes me through the older section of the grounds, the part with the big granite monuments and the family plots with the iron fencing around them. Graves going back into the late 1800s in some spots. Nobody gets buried out here anymore. There's no room and the visitors are sparse, maybe a handful a week at most. Usually older folks coming to see their parents or grandparents. I heard it before I saw it. Scraping sound, shovel on dirt. It's coming from somewhere in the middle of the old section. My first thought was honestly that a groundhog or something had gotten under the fence yet was going to town on a plot. It happened sometimes with the soft ground around older graves. I didn't hurry, just redirected toward the sound. With my flashlight low, I came around the Hargrove Monument, one of the bigger ones, a 12-foot granite obelisk that I've used as a landmark for 12 years, and stopped. There was a man in the middle of plot 114 digging up the grave. Not poking around, not crouching down, examining something, standing waist deep in a hole he dug himself with a proper long-handed shovel, working at a steady pace, the camping lantern propped against the headstone threw yellow light across the whole scene, neat pile of displaced dirt to one side. He was wearing work gloves and a canvas jacket and a knit cap. He looked for all the world like a man doing a job he'd been hired to do. I stood behind the Hargrove Monument for about 30 seconds, just watching. Then I radioed the gatehouse line which forwards to the county non-emergency after hours and told him what I had and asked for a unit. And then I walked toward plot 114 with my flashlight up. He heard me coming when I was about 20 feet out and looked up. And that was the first thing that got under my skin because he didn't startle. A man caught digging up a grave at 1 in the morning by security guard should startle, should drop the shovel or run away, should do something with his face that reflects the situation he's in. He just looked at me, calm, almost tired, like I was a minor inconvenience he'd been vaguely expecting. I told him to put the shovel down and step out of the hole. He set the shovel against the dirt pile and climbed out and stood there brushing his gloves off against his jacket. I asked him what he was doing and he told me he was the grandson of the woman buried here and that he discovered there was something in the grave that shouldn't be there and he was retrieving it. I asked him what specifically and he said personal effects had been buried by mistake, that the family hadn't realized until recently and that he tried to go through proper channels and been told it would take months. Said he figured this was easier. I told him to sit down on the ground and keep his hands where I could see them, and he did. No argument, and we waited for the deputies in silence. He didn't try to run and didn't try to talk me out of anything. Just sat there in the cold next to a hole he dug and waited. 2 officers got there inside 20 minutes. They got him cuffed and walked him to the car and then one of them came back and we both looked down on the hole together with our flashlights. The coffin lid was exposed and it had been opened before. Not tonight. Not recently. Tonight, anyway. The wood around the edges had old disturbance marks, soil compression patterns that the officer pointed out to me. Somebody had been in this grave before tonight, more than once. Was his read on it? Based on how subtle the disruption looked, they got the county medical examiner out around 3 in the morning and I sat in the gatehouse and drank the last of my cold coffee and watched the lights out in the old section. What they found in that coffin I know only partially because the detective who interviewed me a few days later shared what she could. The woman buried in plot 114 died in 1987. She'd been in the ground for nearly 36 years, undisturbed as far as anybody knew. She wasn't alone in there anymore. What was with her? Connected to the man they'd arrested, to a missing persons case from 8 months prior, a woman whose disappearance had gone cold without a single credible lead. He'd put her there because a grave that old with no living immediate family and no recent visitors was as close to invisible as you could get. He'd been banking on the math, on the odds of anyone ever looking at a 36-year-old grave in the quiet section of the cemetery nobody paid much attention to. You've been out here before. Multiple times, the examiner concluded, maintaining it, checking on it, doing whatever it is a person like that does. I've walked past plot 114 on my rounds twice a night for 12 years. Every single night, same route, same landmark, same glance at the old section. I walked past it the night before I caught him and the night before that. And every night stretching back further than I want to calculate. I looked normal every time, apparently neat, undisturbed. Just another old grave in a quiet section. He was good at putting it back. I've requested a route change. Management approved it without asking why. I don't do the South Loop anymore. I was 14 years old and embracing rebellion against my parents, administrators and anybody else who tried to stand in my way. A year earlier I was arrested at school for possession of weed and I was forced to attend court-ordered NA along with my other rehab counseling. My mother had dropped me off in a sketchy area of town for my weekly meeting that lasted from 8 to 10 p.m. It was summertime, so the sun had set before I got out. The NA meeting was hosted in a halfway house on a block that had been pretty much occupied by nothing but other halfway houses. My mom was unaware of this at the time. The guys in my NA group were amazing. They had been through hell and came out on the other side. They listened to me, understood me, gave me advice that I would cherish for years to come, and eventually protected me from grave danger. The house my NA meeting was located in happened to be on a one-way street with no street parking. However, there was a gas station around the corner that had ample parking, so my mom had told me to walk about 2.5 blocks to the gas station after the meeting for her to pick me up after my group. One night I made my way up the street heading for the gas station which was directly behind the house. As I was passing, I got to the last house on the block right before I planned to turn left to go 1 block west to my pickup. That's when I saw them. There was a group of men on the porch, maybe 5 or 6, and one with a mirror on his lap. They immediately called out to me asking my name and what I was doing. I ignored them and sped up my pace, but before I could get past, they were walking towards me. One of them asked for the time and I immediately knew I had to run. I sprinted back down the street from where I'd come and they proceeded to chase after me. I knew I couldn't outrun them, so I dipped into a driveway, drove under a parked truck and hid, knowing my life was on the line. They followed me within inches of where I hid. I could hear them saying, "Where the heck did she go? Find her." I trembled, lying on my belly underneath the truck waiting for someone to drag me out by my ankles. They searched the yard. I could hear them pushing through the bushes to find me. After a few minutes they decided that I must have gotten away and returned to their halfway house. I slid out from under the truck and climbed a fence that separated the property I was on from the house my meeting was in. I ran back into my meeting house where they were all still gathered together and told them what happened. I wish I could still remember their names, but I will never forget the way they comforted me and the protective nature they displayed. As soon as I told them what happened, several of them stood up and took action. I don't know what they did, but I was chaperoned by the few guys that stayed behind. Back to the gas station where my mother was waiting anxiously, told her the scenario and she took me to the police station to make a report. We have never heard of any legal action was taken, but I have no doubt that my NA boys unleashed a furious vengeance on those weirdos. I wish I could have spent more time with them. This happened to me a few years back when I was in my early 20s. At the time, I worked in a department store at a makeup counter. The job relies heavy on good customer service and building relationships because you want people to keep coming back to spend money on your product. We are given personalized business cards so that we can build our own client base, very important for a commission department. It's not uncommon to be familiar with the people who frequently shop at the store. As workers, our training is focused on being friendly and accommodating. One day while I was working, I had to move to a makeup counter that wasn't my own to cover someone's lunch break. It was a really slow day so I was just leaning on the counter, people watching. I could tell most shoppers were just browsing, so I kept to myself. One of the people that I noticed was a very tall and broad man. He walked very slowly, almost hunched over. His face was fixed very aggressively like he was angry but focused. He circled around the corner a few times but I could feel his gaze on me instead of the products. After a few rotations around the department, I decided to greet him in case he needed help. It wasn't until he came directly over to me that I realized just how big he actually was. I'm a 4'10", 140-pound female, so I feel pretty small regardless, but even with his slouched posture, he was over 6 feet tall and well over twice my weight. I will never forget his teeth. They were completely black in the front. Your eyes couldn't help but go right to them. Despite his menacing appearance, he was soft-spoken. Truthfully, I could tell he wasn't all there by the way he talked. He told me no when I asked if he needed help, but requested my number. Very direct. We had never spoken before. I declined and said that I was in a relationship and that it would be inappropriate. He then asked if he could have a business card for the counter in case he wanted to get products. Since I wasn't on my normal counter and I really wanted to get him away, I handed him my coworker's business card and told him to call if he had any questions. It worked and he walked away after that, filling me with relief. Only a couple of minutes later, the phone on the counter rings. I answer with my preppy customer service voice and say, "Thank you for calling. How can I help?" And immediately I know it's the same guy. When he starts talking, he starts asking me again for my personal number and I explain once that I can't do that, but he says he just wants to talk. He explains since he wasn't getting the hint. I say, "I should have told you that I'm married. You can't have my number." Politely, he apologizes and hangs up. I thought that would be the end of him, but for the next few weeks or so I spent much of my time at work anxious that he would show up. I would see him every week and he would lurk around the corner looking for me. Anytime I would see him, I'd immediately drop what I was doing to run and hide or run to the closest customer and offer any bit of assistance to make it look like I was busy so he wouldn't talk to me. I successfully dodged him every time and it came to the point where I stopped seeing him. I was thrilled. I had almost completely forgotten about him all until one day I decided to go to Walmart by myself to pick up a few things on my day off. I generally like to shop alone. I can take all the time I need and I like leisurely looking around. I grabbed a basket and made my way over to the cosmetic, hair and wellness section. Since that's where most of the things I needed were, I only managed to grab a few things before I locked eyes with him as I walked by the supplement aisle. I had recently changed my hair color and wasn't wearing my work uniform, so I didn't think he'd realize who I was. I was ready to go about my shopping and ignore him until I noticed that he dropped the items he had in his hand and started heading my way. I panicked and quickened my pace. Immediately I thought to myself, he's not going to really follow you through the store, right? But as I turned around to look, I could see his humongous body just plowing through people with that same terrifying look on his face, only meaner. His black teeth are growing closer with a snarl. Since the direction I was walking was the opposite of the exit and there was no way in hell I was going to turn around, I decided that my best course of action would be to follow the perimeter of the store and cut down the center section, which would bring me close to the registers. Speed walked the entire time in the hopes of losing him amongst all the people, but never once turned around again. By the time I made it to the register area, I could actually feel him behind me. Still not wanting to turn around to look, I glanced in the reflection of the soda machines that are in between the registered aisles to see how close he was. To my horror, there was only about 1.52 feet between us. I was afraid to just drop my stuff around the door in case he followed me to my car. I parked in the far back of the parking lot and didn't want to risk it. I also didn't want to get in line at the register since the lines were long and I would be just standing out in the open alone. Instead, I walked into the cluster of people crowded around the self-checkout line. I noticed another large, bolder gentleman with his carriage in the middle, and ran straight for him. The people were so closely clustered together that the man following me couldn't make it through. I ran over to the man in line and grabbed onto his carriage. I said, "I'm so sorry. I'm not trying to cut you, but there's a man that's been following me through half the store and I just need to stand with you." He was very sweet and understanding and let me be with him while we waited in line and even let me go ahead of him so I could leave quicker. As I was cashing out, I could see my periphery vision my stalker staring at me and pacing about, but he couldn't come near me since the self-checkout is somewhat sectioned off. By the time I had finished and grabbed my receipt, I couldn't see him anymore. I looked around but he was nowhere. I thought about asking the older man to walk me to my car, but he still wasn't finished at the register. So I decided to call my boyfriend and make a run for it. Staying on the phone, I explained to him what was going on as I sprinted to my car in tears, frantically looking around in case he tried to follow me outside. I made it to my car safely and rushed right home, breaking down to my parents about what just happened. Could feel it in my bones that the man wanted to do something to me, and thankfully I didn't find out what that was. His aggressive aura was palpable. To this day I can still remember the adrenaline, nervousness and sheer terror I felt when he followed me. I never felt so vulnerable and helpless, even with all of those people around. I quit that job roughly 2 years later. I'd only seen him there one other time since that incident. But I still live in constant fear that we will cross paths again. I'm afraid to shop alone, something that I wouldn't have given a second thought to years before. So my parents got a dog. I want to lead with that because it's important. Important context for why I ended up in this situation. They've been talking about getting one for years. Empty nest stuff. And they finally did it 2 months ago. A 2-year-old rescue named Hank. Some kind of lab mix, a big dopey thing that my mom is completely obsessed with, which is awesome. Hank seems like a good dog, but the problem is they don't fully trust him alone overnight yet because he's still adjusting and apparently ate an entire couch cushion his second week there. So when they booked a long weekend trip upstate to visit my aunt, they asked me to come stay at the house and watch it. I'm 20, home from school for the summer with no real reason to say no. Free food, a familiar bed. Easy enough, I said. That was my first mistake probably. I got to my parents' place Friday evening. They left around 6 I think, and for the first couple of hours everything was completely fine. Ink was happy to see me and we watched TV. I made food and he sat with me by my feet the whole time, which my mom warned me. He does normal dog stuff. I went to bed around midnight with Hank at the foot of the bed and fell asleep fast. I woke up at some point in the night to Hank growling. Not barking, but growling, low and continuous, the kind of sound that's more vibration than noise. I sat up and he was standing at the bedroom door facing the hallway, completely rigid, every muscle in him locked up. I'd known this dog for 2 months and heard him make approximately 0 serious sounds. He was the least intimidating animal I'd ever encountered. Seeing him like that in the dark was genuinely startling. I listened. The house was quiet. I told him to relax and he didn't. He just kept that low growl going with his eyes fixed on the hallway. I got up and checked the house. Every room, every door and every window. Everything locked and nothing out of place. I even checked the basement, which I hate doing. At any hours at night. But I did it. And nothing. I went back to bed. Hank eventually settled and I fell back asleep in the morning. I'd mostly forgotten about it. Saturday was fine. Took Hank for a long walk, did nothing, ate my parents' food again and completely relaxed. I went to bed earlier, maybe at 11 or so, tired from the wall. I woke up at 2 a.m. to Hank gone from the bed. I could hear him somewhere in the house. That same low growling. I got up and followed it. He was in the kitchen, standing in front of the basement door in the same posture as the night before, with the same locked-up stillness. I stood there in the dark kitchen in my socks, looking at him and felt something I hadn't felt the night before, which was that the dog was not going to move from the door. I stood there for a long moment. Then I heard something on the other side of it. Just a single soft sound. Something shifting like weight redistributing on the wooden basement stairs. One quiet creak and then nothing. I grabbed the knife on the counter, took out the biggest one and called 911 from the kitchen. While Hank stood guard at the door, I whispered the address and told him I thought somebody was in the basement. And the dispatcher told me to stay on the line and stay away from the basement door, which I was obviously happy to do. 2 officers got there in 4 minutes and I let them in the front and one of them took Hank by the collar while the other opened the basement door with his hand on his holster. They found him on the stairs. A man probably mid-40s, sitting on the 4th step from the bottom in the dark. Like he'd been there for a while. Not armed or aggressive, but just sitting there. He looked exhausted more than anything. When the officer asked him what he was doing, he said he used to live here. Saying it like that explained everything. He said he just needed somewhere to sleep and he knew the back basement window latch had always been broken and figured nobody would notice. The broken window latch my parents have apparently had for years and never fixed. The officer looked at me and I looked at the officer. They ran his name. He had a record. Nothing violent, mostly trespassing and vagrancy. And he had indeed owned that house at some point and sold it 12 years ago. Whether that made him feel entitled to come back and sleep in the basement, I genuinely could not tell you. He seemed more sad than dangerous though. They took him out and I gave my statement in of the case kitchen while Hank sat on my feet the whole time. Here's the thing that I keep coming back to though. The officer who cleared the basement walked the whole thing before they brought the guy out. He came back upstairs and mentioned that the old couch down there, the one my parents had been meaning to throw out for years, had apparently been slept on recently. Multiple times recently, he said, based on the indentation and some personal items nearby, like a water bottle and stuff like that. My parents had been in that house 9 years. Hank has been there for 2 months. You can draw your own conclusions about how long this had been going on before Hank showed up and started waking people up at 2 a.m. I fixed the window latch myself the next morning, bought the hardware at the store down the road and watched a video and got it done in about 20 minutes. I didn't mention it to my parents until I got home. My mom cried a little. My dad immediately went and bought a security system. Hank got an extra treat that night. He deserved probably about 100 of them. It